Welcome back, everybody. It is the Working Brother yet again with George McMillan III. It's been only a minute or two for us, and it's been maybe a day or two for you. George, welcome back. And before I ask, I'm going to presume that you're doing excellent, as always. Great. Right?
When I'm always thrilled to be on with Working Brother.
Of course, it's a relaxing place to be. Nothing we say here has anything to do with reality, and we just make jokes because this is the worst comedy show on YouTube, right, George? If anybody knows,
That's
you know.
why I
You've been here from the onset. You've been here from the onset. Also, shout out to George's new website, link in the description, as it is with all the videos that he's been doing with the Working Brother. RavenGeostrategic.com. We're getting into the thick of the 7P plan. We've got long paragraphs here. We might even get Microsoft to read it for us. Should we get Microsoft to read it for us? That'll be hilarious. George?
We're just... These papers will be posted, I don't know, whenever me and Joshua gets around to it, but whatever. What we wanted to... Okay, first of all, what we're doing is, conspiracy theories, people use that as a simplification to explain what's going on. What we actually want to do is get into Marxist theory. Yeah, they abandoned the scientific project. They stopped doing comparative analysis between free market theory versus Rousseau, Marx, and Engels' leftist theory. So yeah, conspiracy theories are just a simplification of that. I go into that detail in my unified behavioral theory papers. We're trying to break it down to something simple. They post-Gramsci, post-Lukács leftist theory tries to go after the cultural aspects of Marxism, and it comes down to the 7Ps of professors, prosecutors, police, priests, press, and parents. So you're explaining the difference between Christian patriarchal systems and Marxist socialism and matriarchy. So how did this come about in the United States? Well, the Frankfurt School brought over that kind of new form of leftism in the United States. It married with John Dewey's, reconstruction in philosophy, which means he wants social justice and pragmatism to be the goal of philosophy, and he wanted to ditch the ancient Greeks talking about the nomos physis distinction. Nomos physis distinction was, the laws of ideals, the laws of man versus the laws of nature, or in this case, when you're talking about ideological theory, it's the ideals of man versus the laws of nature. So you're still talking about which ideology best explains human nature the best. And in my unified behavioral theory, I start to line up the theories that best explain that, because Marxists will come along and say, well, you have global income disparity, Marx must be right. Well, no, he's not right. What best explains that is a free market theory that global economic growth is way outpacing global economic growth. So you have a catastrophic loose wage labor scenario occurring across the globe. So you want, in that scenario, you would want to stop third world population growth, is what's dropping global wage labors. And, you want to increase economic growth, and you increase that by going to a capitalist model. Now, in a capitalist model, you're not going to get relative equity on a global scale, because developing world economic growth has just been logarithmic. Again, that part is a different series of papers and slide sets for a different day. What we're talking about here is they've taken that specious argument or spurious argument of there's global income disparity, so therefore Marxism must be right. It's a specious argument because they don't talk about population rates of change and economic growth rates of change. economic growth rates of change increase much faster in a capitalist society, because centrally planned societies is where you're controlling everybody. You're really slowing down economic growth activity, like I explained in the last paper. When you start talking about if you're going to control each football player's move on a field, or do you train them to play? If you train them to play, several hours a day in practice over several years, they get very quick at recognizing play patterns. And then the plays in American football go very, very quickly. And there's a lot going on there as far as how an offense lines up, how the defense lines up, and they're figuring each other out. The plays don't take very long, but since there's so many different plays you can run out of a system, they're breaking down keys very, very quickly. So yeah, you're trying to fake each other out and do things. If you were to have one player move at a time, a play would take 30 minutes. But these, athletes know the game very, very well. These plays are actually only take a few seconds. If you take that analogy out and you start to do a centrally planned economy is where the leaders actually try to move people. People need to be able to play and do what they need to do in their local area and compete against each other constructively. That's what capitalist theory is about. That's why it's a lot more effective. So Marxist theory is a completely, there's so many different levels, aspects of why it absolutely cannot work. We'll get into socialist calculation debates another day of how you actually price goods, but that's not what we're going to get into. What we're getting into with the 7P plan is they took out the Austrian school economics theory of why free markets work the best, and they supplanted it with, well, there's global income disparity, so if we move to a social system, won't that fix it? Oh no, that's going to make everything way worse. But they take out the failed Marxist experiments so people don't know that it will get way worse. Or at least the left is hoping that Marxism will work this time. But then the neocons and the 1%ers know it's not going to work. It's not going to work this time either. So yes, they'll ride out the financial system, and then at some point they're going to short it on the way down, which is called the Great Reset. So there's a big difference between the 7P plan of the left in taking over the West. America is what I focus on because I'm American. So they're going to take it over, but since it's a parasitic movement, it's going to kill the host. So as it's killing the host, that's when the 1%ers in Wall Street in the city of London, that's when they're going to short the system and collapse it and do the Great Reset. So it's not a conspiracy theory. There's different interest groups doing different things, and it's going to produce an outcome. So that's what we want to break down in predictive modeling. And this version of the 7P plan, we're talking about the Frankfurt School came over in the elite universities and in the OSS at the time. They hired Marcuse and some other ones, Horkheimer, in the OSS because they were working on psychological manipulation techniques. Kind of like what the Brits were doing in the previous video. So here they started out in the university systems, which are in college towns and urban areas. And then they turned the urban areas into blue cities. And on the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States, they turned those blue cities, they got enough voting power in those urban areas, and they took over all the different university systems in those areas because they trained 1 professors in the elite universities, and then they go teach at the minor universities in the area as well. And over a few decades, they completely changed their curriculum, not because of a conspiracy theory. They actually really believe this. So they're able to get enough voting power in the urban areas to outvote the rural areas in each state. So they started with some states, and it's gone to more and more states. In the United States, it's the Northeast, and the Midwest is what they took over, and the West Coast. And they took over the West Coast mainly by mass migration and literally changing the demographics to where a lot of conservatives leave the states, because I know you have a lot of
sounds like Russian propaganda. Sounds like Russian propaganda from some Telegram channel. That woman on that British TV show was right, man. You crazy conspiracy theories. Oh, interesting mug you have there, George. What kind of mug is that? This is not scripted at all. Do you want to tell us what mug that is that you have there before the conspiracy theories get going?
No, I got a lot to say about this mug. This is what you call a coffee mug, and I drink coffee out of the coffee mug.
All right. It has a very interesting sign there.
Yes. Since you had your pro Hamas shirt on.
Mine is pro-Palestinian. It's not pro-Hamas. It's pro-Palestinian. It's pro-freedom fighter. It's pro-truth. It's pro-anti-occupation.
Yeah, well, yeah, a lot can be said about that. So, I have my I have a Mossad cup that somebody gave me.
Somebody who may or may not have been from the Mossad.
Right. Well, you can just order them online. Anyway, whatever.
Why would you want to order that?
I just thought I would since you had the pro-Palestinian kafara on, I was going to drink out of a cup.
As you should.
Yeah.
But the full joke is.
What I really wanted,
yeah, go on.
Wait, do you have? Is there other people, say, from the Balkans in your that listen to your program?
Yes, there are people who are from the Balkans, as in Serbs as well, who listen to this.
Yeah. So I was joking around. I was saying I was gonna have a KLA shirt next time.
Not gonna happen. Yeah, not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Not gonna happen.
My friends in Skopje were always talking about the amount of Albanians that are flooding into that flood into North Macedonia, I guess is how you say it.
There's a problem of that in the region, but that is a whole different can of worms, and that's a lot more how can I say, U.S. foreign policy influenced than this is. So yeah, okay. We're not gonna have any KLA guests here anytime soon.
Okay.
So yeah, don't do that. But it's good that we outed this joke with the whole Mossad cup, and it prompted me to get one of these going. So this is now here.
Yeah.
I should probably give it like a little fade or like an animation or something. We'll get into that. Also, you were talking about how the blue people have made everything go red in the political sense, and we've got the failed stock market up top and the victory banner.
Yeah, like I say, I think that's more once because of Kamala's. I think that the stock. Well, there's a bunch of things that are going on. I mean, China is going through its problems of. Its problems are caused by immense corruption and city planning that's backfired, building all these big housing development cities, that brand new buildings, and no people live in them because they're not put anywhere near the jobs are and where people actually want to live. So yeah, more central planning that's failed. You have those issues.
Is it central planning that's failed, or is it the remnants of the CIA's? What was that guy before Xi Jinping? What was his name? The guy who got the boot at the last Communist Party meeting?
I'm not sure.
I can't remember his name.
Oh, yeah.
He was basically in the pocket of the CIA. Dao Xiaoping or something. I think he was basically a puppet of the U.S. Post Tiananmen Square, basically. From what I understand, long story short. So to say that everything that's happening in China is because of Xi Jinping, I think is a little xenophobic, my friend. Have you been listening to American propaganda? Has
those
Musk
policies started way before he actually got into office, but they accelerated while he was in office.
Maybe he's just cleaning it out.
Yeah, this is true.
Nobody can speak to this better than you. Who had the Japanese stock market collapsing first? How do you feel? How do you feel about the Japanese stock market being the one that started the dominoes? Was it expected?
No.
I mean, their debt to like money ratio is like infinite, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they have in a way, oh boy, in a way that they never really recovered from the '97 crash. And a lot of people think that was engineered by the United States because they were starting to become dominant in automobile manufacturing and electronics and robotics.
Mm-hmm.
So and also what you have coming up is if there's a war in the Pacific Rim, yeah, China is definitely building up their navy so they can cut off the Philippines, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan from receiving any oil supplies from the Middle East, going through the Strait of Malacca and then back up through the South China Sea. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of fears about that occurring. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it. That, and if there's a war with Iran, well then the Strait of Hormuz gets blocked.
This is not scripted. I promise you that joke was scripted, but this interaction here is not scripted. I had this map loaded. I didn't even tell George. Check this out. U.S. Navy assets in the Middle East, and I named it choke point strategy, naval choke point strategy. So tell us, George, what happens when, not if, when it escalates in the Middle East?
All right. Yeah. When you get to a map like this, okay, we're not going to get to the other 7P plan today. When you get to, you have a very good map up. There's a bunch of things occurring, and here you have an overlay of geostrategic plans that are in play at once. So yes, people will talk about, oh yeah, the Houthis are bombing, are blocking the Strait of Bab el-Mandab in the Red Sea, in the north ends of the Red Sea. Of course, you have the Suez Canal. You have a Shia versus Sunni rivalry occurring within a great power struggle. So regionally, the Sunnis have been trying to surround the Shia ever since the great the Shia revolution in Tehran in 78, going into 79. They attained a theocracy. Once you have a theocracy, well, let's define theocracy first. It's where a group of imams elect their own supreme leader to lead the country. So the Shia have their theocracy in 79 with the American hostage crisis, all of that during the Carter administration. Well, in Islam, family dynasties are illegitimate forms of government in Islam because when Muhammad died, his followers, the imams, got together and elected a caliph. So the only legitimate form of government in Islam is a caliph elected by a small group of imams. So that being said,
that's not true. This is like me being a retard. That's not true. It can also be elected. It can also be elected that are imams chosen by the CIA to be the Islamic State in the Levant, and then you have like the Muslim Caliphate of jihadis.
Well, it doesn't work that way, but
it's an abomination. It's an abomination, which was dealt with by the Russians. Continue.
We're going to go into that again. We're explaining regional dynamics occurring within great power dynamics. So yeah, we will get to that. So ever since then, the Sunnis then had their grand mosque seizure in November, December 1979. So
yeah, we mentioned that in
was,
an earlier talk. I'll leave a link.
yes, and unless people know about that, nothing in the Middle East will make sense until you understand that. Because once that occurred, the House Assad started funding the Wahhabist movement. And within the Wahhabist movement, that's how you get the Sunni VEOs, the Sunni violent extremist organizations that are called terrorist organizations. So those are Al Qaeda was first, and then ISIS. ISIS was Al Qaeda in Iraq, and then it became its own thing. They have allegiances.
Time out. What do you mean? What do you mean? ISIS and Al Qaeda were first. What about the Mujahideen? Who are you kidding?
Well, they're outgrowths. Okay, so in '79, well, we went over some of this before, and of course you have to be a wise ass. So yes, we are going to go there. We are going to go. Oh, wait! I'm missing my opportunity. Okay, wait! I forgot.
Wait, let me go to the settings of this thing live while we're talking. Yeah. Continue.
All right. So after '79, you had the House Assad had to pay off the Wahhabist movement, so they started funding the Mujahideen in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Now, that was Operation Cyclone, done by Zbigniew Brzezinski and Stansfield Turner. Zbigniew Brzezinski was President Carter's national security advisor. Stansfield Turner was a Navy admiral, but they had then become Director of Central Intelligence, the DCI, at that time. So you had the National Security Advisor and the DCI, because otherwise I'll go into all acronyms. So I did stop and explain this time what the acronyms are. So you had the NSC and the DCI formed Operation Cyclone to fund the Sunni VEOs operating out of Pakistan. In reality, they're funding mostly the Pashtun areas in Pakistan. They were funding Tajik extremists also in northern Pakistan, and then launching them over the Suleiman Mountains into Afghanistan to push out the Russians. Now, why that occurred was because
Russian propaganda.
General Zia al-Haq of Pakistan was an Islamist and wanted to convert his country from the more passive forms of Islam to something stronger, to push the atheist Soviet Union not only out of Afghanistan but out of all the stands. Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan. His idea was to push them all the way back. So Stansfield Turner and Zbigniew Brzezinski, with Operation Cyclone, started increasing the funding going into these groups in Pakistan. It was called the Mujahideen. Later on, it turned into the Taliban. The Taliban is basically, strictly, for all intents and purposes, strictly a Pashtun organization. They wanted to reclaim. They wanted to make a Pashtunistan in Pakistan and Afghanistan because the Brits had divided the Pashtun territory. So they want it back.
George.
Yeah.
I got a layman's question.
The
Taliban. No.
Go ahead.
The Taliban that was fought over, like that took over after the communists, and the Taliban now that took over after the Americans, or after Bagram, or whatever you want to call that pullout. By the way, pullout joke, not very Catholic. Haha. Is it the same Pashtun Taliban? Is it like this, like, because you're saying that they're basically Pashtun, so like it's the same tribe, same people, same story that were that have been there. Go on.
Well, the Pashtun are believed to be 6 of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. And they follow a Pashtunwali as their form of government. It is not
This
Sharia
is where you
law.
take a sip. This is where you take a sip from the cup.
Yeah, I need to get through this though. But it's a Pashtunwali. It's early Hebraic law out of the book of, Genesis, Exodus, and Deuteronomy. It is Bedouin Mosaic law. That's their legal system. It has a lot to do with, a lot in common with Sharia law, but it's not. It is actually early Hebraic law. So anyway, the Sunnis, by going into the Pashtun, are trying to do a few different things. They're trying to take the actual offspring of Abraham that followed the right prophet path, in their mind it's Islam, and Sunni Islam, and then they're trying to encircle the Shia. So ever since they've been trying to encircle the Shia, Iran, and take over Khorasan province is what they want to do, then the Shia have been trying to break out and consolidate all the Shia areas in the Middle East to break out of their encirclement. So they're playing, the Sunnis and the Shia are playing this encirclement breakout game. That's the game that's going on there. If you look at a Sunni versus Shia map of the region, you see that breaking out. Okay, so in that part of Yemen, from southeastern Yemen up to Jeddah in Saudi Arabia is a Shia area. So the Iranians have been funding the Shia area in Yemen. Go down towards Baba. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so that whole region, the Iranians have been funding the Houthis there in order to put pressure and re-encircle Saudi Arabia, because people from the Arabian Peninsula have been trying to surround them since '79. So again, it's the encirclement breakout strategies.
Yin yang. It's literally like a yin yang sign.
Yes. Okay. Now we need to go from this Sunni versus Shia, encirclement breakout strategies to the great power strategies. The neocons want to either break up Russia into republics and oblasts and try to get the oil and natural gas out and get it to Western Europe, to where their allies are, because they don't want the profits to go to Russia so Russia can rebuild its economy and military. Okay, they're doing that anyway.
Surprise, look, George, I got your favorite kind of map. It's an oil and pipelines map of Ukraine.
Right. So
right on cue.
The neocons were hoping that Russia would fall apart once they started attacking the Donbass, and then they put all the sanctions on them after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Of course, moving NATO east is supposed to cut off their ports, pipelines, and their railroad system from economically integrating, with Germany, is what they're really concerned about.
On a side note, I just want to point out that the circled area on this map is this pumping station, and it is one of the targets, let's put it that way, of that recent incursion into the Russian Federation by those German-loving Ukrainian fans of military costumes from the 40s. Go back to the coincidence.
Go back to the Strait of. Okay, actually, just leave it there, and I'll talk about that map, and then put it back to the Strait of Babam and Dama. Okay, so if now they've created the problem where they're stopping Western Europe from taking Russian natural gas, but they thought Russia would collapse and they could extract oil and natural gas different ways. But now Russia is actually doing better under the sanctions, not worse. So now the neocons need to get natural gas to feed Europe. Otherwise, Europe is going to further deindustrialize, and eventually the AfD and Marine Le Pen are going to win. That's going to create another problem. So they can't defeat Russia militarily. They can't defeat China militarily. The weakest part that they can defeat, which is a stretch, is Iran, because Iran is blocking the southern Caspian area. Okay, you got, yeah, just
hold on. I gotta take a break and thank George for his subtle humor. That's a stretch. That was a good one, George.
Yeah.
Anyway, so where did you want me to zoom into? Bab el Mandeb? Down here?
Just leave it pulled out. Just leave it pulled out.
All right.
Because for people, no, zoom it out. Zoom it out.
All
okay.
right.
People don't realize that the Persian Gulf, the Caspian Sea that you see underneath the in the Middle East.
Right there, yeah.
Okay. The Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea, how close they are together. That's what people miss. But there's so much oil and natural gas in the Persian Gulf area and the Caspian Sea area. Now they need to get the natural gas is the equivalent of about $7 a barrel of oil if you can send it via pipeline. It gets 30% more expensive if you have to put it into LNG. So you can't compete with natural gas by pipeline when you amortize costs over 20 years or whatever of the cost of building the pipelines. So now the neocons desperately need a war with Iran and try to, they need to destabilize it, restabilize it in their favor, like they did when they pushed Mossadegh out of office in 1954, and then rebuild pipelines to Germany and Western Europe before the AfD takes over. So that's what the rush is to start a war with Iran. It's all okay. Everybody knows there's oil and gas in the Middle East. Everybody knows it's about energy. But specifically, that's what they want a war with Iran for. Iran knows this. So Iran's counter strategy is to strike back at the Strait of Al-Mandab by arming the Houthis. So since the Iranian policy lines up with the Russian policy and the Chinese policy, the Russians and Chinese know that Iran is the weakest link in that system, and Iran blocks that south of the Caspian Sea area. Then Russia and China are sending weapons and support to Iran to block the Strait of Al-Mandab, because the West is putting on sanctions and trying to block in all their ports, well, Russia's ports and pipelines, and put sanctions on them. So the way that they put sanctions back on the United States is to arm the Houthis to bomb the ships as they go through Strait of Bab el-Mandab. And then now the ships have to go farther around it. The costs go up, causes, it's one of the other factors causing inflation in the United States. Every little bit helps. So that's where the Sunni versus Shia geostrategic plans match up and come into play with the major power competing strategic plans.
So, shall we get into the slides?
Yeah, we can go. Yeah, I can explain geopolitical theory out of the 5 power center doctrine, and then use the 7 Ps to explain all Western domestic politics as well. So I can use 2 frameworks, and I can explain pretty much everything.
The 7 Ps in bullet paragraphs. Do you want to read through them? Or,
yeah.
All right, I'll let you do that. Hold on. There we go.
Here, let me just let me bring up my set.
All right, while you do that,
you're always You're already
Yeah, so
green.
for
All
the
right.
visual stuff.
We
Oh,
don't.
you brought
We
it up
don't.
already? All
Yeah,
right, hold on.
we don't
There
need
we
to
go.
read this verbatim. I'm just
Hmm.
going to go over it. People know
All
what
right.
the 7Ps are. So the idea here is, how do you explain how America's moved left and what's the strategy? So the Frankfurt School moved into the elite universities. Their students graduated. Yeah, and that was in the 1950s. They went into the elite universities. Then they started spreading out to the secondary and tertiary universities over time. And then they moved into any field that after the 1960s that didn't have objective standards and measures. I'm referring to Alan Bloom's book, The Closing of the American Mind. He published it in 1988. He talks about this leftist takeover. And then I like to read that, and I like to put that book in conjunction with Tubi and Kosmida's Psychological Foundations of Culture. I like that those two books kind of go together. Anyway, once they did that, they turned the urban areas, again, Cloward and Piven plan works in this because Cloward and Piven went to Columbia University. Eric Fromm and Tillich, they were in the New School and Union Theological Seminary. They actually produced real theories of human behavior, though. So I kind of try to separate them out of the Frankfurt School. They're mixed up, like Texas Donbass, are mixed up on the confusion of the macro, of how the macro behavioral theories work with the micro behavioral theories, but yet they put out a lot of good work in their field. So I try to take the part that they did good, cut out the rest, and then put it in the rest of my models. That's what I do. So anyway,
The thing. Oh, what did I do here? I clicked the wrong one. The thing about your approach is that you take all of these specific. Hold on. Specific things that are going on, and then you put them all into like big picture analysis, overarching, as you like to say, which basically gives you the ability to see how all the cogwheels work together. That's why we value what you do, George.
Yeah, once you learn these frameworks, you can instantly know why something's occurring, because you know what the strategic plans are in advance. So they've achieved XYZ. You have a strategic plan that goes from A to Z. Well, which one of those letters have they achieved? Which boxes have they checked? And which ones do they need to go? So whatever they've achieved, they're going to try to go to the next phase of it and achieve the rest of it. So where are they? Because you have to keep score somehow. You have to have a measurement system that keeps score. So the strategic plans allow you to say, well, okay, they've achieved this much. They got this much more to go. So now how are they going to achieve the rest of it, or how the adversary is going to try to roll it back? So it's a way to keep score of where they are in the game. So when something happens, I can tell, okay, this side played this card, and then this side is going to respond like this. So when something happens, you immediately know which card they played and then how they're going to achieve the rest of the plan or hold what they got, whatever it is that they're trying to do. Because they're like Zbigniew Brzezinski's book, The Grand Chessboard, they're looking at it like a chessboard. One side, okay, the United States and the UK have an encirclement, sea power versus land power strategy of containment. So like I've said before, Russia and China therefore then have an integration and breakout strategy. So every time you see something here in this system, in the 7P plans, what we're focusing on, the Frankfurt School wanted to transform the West into a socialist system. Yeah, they realized communism didn't work, so they wanted to go to market socialism, like Fabian incremental socialism policy. So it's not supposed to be revolutionary Marxism. It's more an incrementalist Fabian socialism strategy. My constitutional law professors were incrementalist neoliberals. So that's how I learned the legal strategy of it. And I just transformed it into the economic strategies as well. But so, okay, so they took over the universities in mostly the urban areas of the United States. And over the decades, they moved into the other universities. Their graduates became the K through 12 teachers, and they started to teach a whole Marxist program, from the K through 12 area. One of my friend of a friend, his family members are teachers in Brooklyn, New York, and they're very hardcore, progressive leftists. And there are no Republican politicians, teachers, professors anywhere in the New York system, K through 12 university system, yet they blame Republicans for everything. There aren't any Republicans in the equation, and their schools are failing, they're way below grade, and yet they blame Republicans that aren't even there. So and it's the same thing in Chicago, and the same thing in all the blue cities, same thing in Boston. Well, I know Boston's kind of different, but anyway, they started in the blue universities, they created blue cities, then they created blue states. Now they've got the East Coast and the West Coast, so they're arguably winning the popular vote in the United States. So they want to get rid of the Electoral College and go by popular vote, because then they can actually win in the United States, both the White House, the Senate, and Congress, and both houses of the legislature, and then start accelerating the rest of the P plan so there can be no effective counter-revolution. So they're at the cusp of achieving that now. And since using the American football analogy, they're at the 2-yard line, just about to punch it in the end zone. And then along came Donald Trump, and he's starting to reverse it on free market principles, but he doesn't really understand the strategy as much. So in his first term, he was doing it just intuitively, trying to rebalance things. And then the deep state was against him, undermined him. Now they want to kill him. So with a systematic understanding,
the deep state, you say?
Yeah. Yes, the permanent state.
The aircraft carrier, or that it's that mapper channel, the Ukrainian mapper channel. That's what it is. Deep state. That's who we're talking about. Yeah. Shall we get to the third paragraph?
Right. So once they take over the blue cities, they start changing, the prosecutors and all the rest of the P's in the urban areas, and then they take over a whole state. They only need to turn, say, Texas and Florida from conservative states to liberal states, and then they will achieve the single party state. So that's why, since Trump is going to have a much better understanding of exactly how to push back and exactly what to reverse, especially if they take over the White House and the Senate and the House of Representatives, Congress.
If they take over Republicans.
With conservative Republicans.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into the rhino. There's international peoples there's Republicans in name only that you call rhinos. So they need to overpower them too. Those are mostly the neoconservatives I was talking about. And I have to look at my messages like I'm still in an operations center. I can't help it. It's an ingrained habit. So anyway.
Like we discussed, that's why I have tinted glasses here.
Right. So they're about to achieve the 7 Ps. They've achieved the 7 Ps in the states. So now they've done this in the red states. They still have the urban areas. So now they have to turn a few more red states to blue states. So this 7P paper explains, the strategy of going from blue universities to blue cities to blue states, to then how to turn the rest of the states, to replicate that in the rest of the red states, and then you achieve the single party socialist state. is not the they that are doing this. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's an ongoing phenomenon that's occurred, again, because they abandoned the scientific project in the university system, and they don't teach comparative ideological theories. To reverse that, we need to get an alternative university system and go back to a comparative ideological systems theory where you actually start talking about the failed Marxist experiments. That's what needs to be done here. And that's what this 7P paper is about, what the strategy is, how to do a counter strategy.
The police. They're doing British?
No, we don't need to go through the 7Ps. I just did the whole paper just now.
All right. So are we done? Or should we do the 8th P projection? Let's do the 8th P projection. Let's do it on the fly. What would you say the 8th P has to do with on the fly? And by the way, I just want to dispel any rumors. No, I'm not married. And no, I did not stop smoking. I did stop drinking coffee because we've been recording for like 3 hours, so I think I've had enough coffees. But thank you for everybody to everybody who's bought me coffees. I'll have some water now. Tell me, George, the 8th P projection.
Yeah, it really is apparent in the United States that they follow Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals of continuously accuse the other your rival of what you're doing.
Oh, really?
So
that's a rule for radicals?
Yeah, it's in Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals.
Haven't read that.
Oh, it's well, Joaquin Flores did the show on Sharp's nonviolent protest or revolution strategies, right? Well, corollary to that is Saul Alinsky's community organizing. So he was he was a leftist that was actually a kind of traditional leftist, as far as he was really for working class people and trying to do community organizing to improve some of the ghettos in Chicago area. And when he was in his undergrad degree at I think it was University of Illinois at Chicago, I think, one of the Chicago universities. He was studied sociology, I believe, which is traditionally leftist. I mean, the Frankfurt School people were all sociologists trying to blend psychology to political theory is what it's trying to do. Anyway, my method of taking Fromm's productive character orientation versus sadomasochistic character orientation and paralleling that to Aristotle's proper and perverted forms of government actually does that in a very solid model. But anyway, they're not trying to develop real theories of human behavior. They're trying to expound on Marxism. So he goes and he starts his community organizing, and he was looking at how the Chicago gangsters.
He who? And when is this? Around when? What time frame are we talking? Because I'm totally illiterate when it comes to the name you mentioned. What was the name?
Oh, Saul Alinsky. It's during the 1960s Vietnam War protest era. Yeah, I was a little kid back then, but I remember it. So I kind of.
The name rings a bell, but I just can't put anything to it.
Yeah, the late 60s anti-Vietnam War protests were very, very big here in the United States, and they were very, very big in France. And in France, they used to yell, Marx, Mao, and Marcuse. Marcuse was the leader of the Frankfurt School.
I had an American high school education, so I don't know anything about protests about the Vietnam War.
Yeah. Well, you're getting it now. So thank God that you know me.
Yeah. Tell me about the French protest.
No, we're going to go back to Saul Alinsky because we're talking about rules of radicals. So what he learned from working with the gangsters and in working with trying to community organize in the urban areas of the United States is how to always keep your opponent off balance and make them defend their principles to take some of the heat off of you. So, yeah, he started. If you look at Graham's hierarchy of disagreement, where you have, central thesis, counterpoints, and then down at the bottom of it you have sarcasm and name calling. Well, his rules of radicals are basically the bottom end of Graham's hierarchy of disagreement. It's just name calling and ad hominem attacks. Nothing on point, no counter arguments, just ad hominem attacks. So his rules for radicals is, throw suspicion off of you. So when they accuse you of doing something, you're saying, well, you're just retaliating. You're just, because I said that to you, now you're calling me that. So it's a way to get out in front of your own misgivings by blaming somebody else first, and then we're like,
George,
no,
you're not funny. You're not funny, George.
That's what you're doing.
You're not funny, George.
I know.
This is where you say you're not funny either, and then we play it out.
I'll take that criticism.
I was projecting, or trying to, like, suggestively project that this is the worst comedy show on YouTube. George, it's been almost an hour. Do you we've got about 10 minutes to the hour, and I just for habit's sake. There's no hard break here. There's no sponsors, by the way. Buy me a coffee. Do you want to wrap it up? Kind of. Your train of thought.
Well, since you're going to say buy me a coffee, I'm going to tell people to go to ravengeostrategic.com.
Right there. It's linked in the description.
Yeah. And it's not about memorizing what the P's are. It's how to interpret events. If you know what their strategies are of how to go from blue cities to blue states to come over to have a single party blue America, you can look at how many 7Ps they have, what they have to go. Again, they've really got most of the Ps, except they need the police P. That's the one that they need. They need to control all the gun carriers. Military police, then outlaw, take away the Second Amendment, and they want to keep people from being able to resist. Because look at what they're doing in England. The people there don't have a Second Amendment. They can't own firearms. And the traditional British people are now just being invaded, and they have no power in government.
You think they're going to have a tea party?
Something like that. We'll see.
You think it's possible?
Yeah, well, I mean, that would be Nigel Farage, I guess, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
Nigel Farage. No comment.
Well, I mean, what they're looking at is Nigel Farage in the UK, Marine Le Pen in France, and the AfD in Germany.
And then we avoid World War III, basically, right? That's the hope.
Well, then you avoid the 7P plan from occurring in all three areas. Yeah.
World War III. George, anything else you want to clue us in about the protests in the Vietnam era? Because like you mentioned the protests in France, and I never heard of anti-Vietnam protests in France.
Oh, well, we should do a show on that, because the OSS, then it became the CIA, got very, very good, along with the FBI counterintelligence agencies, got very, very good at infiltrating the labor union groups that were pro-communist in the United States, and also especially in France and Italy and Germany. And in Germany, it was Baader-Meinhof gang. And in Italy, it was the Red Brigade. I forget how you say that in Italian. And in France, it was the French communist groups. So they infiltrated a lot of those groups, and they tried to co-opt a lot of its members. But they learned how to infiltrate groups and co-opt the left movement. But they did that. But as they got better at that, they started bringing, the co-opted leftists actually started entering into these intelligence organizations, not just in the United States, but in the UK and France. So that's how these government institutions actually got almost now are taken over by the left. It's from those 1960s movements of co-opting them. Now they actually almost have control over them. So when you talk about the 7 Ps, this has been in play for a long time. And then the way it works out in each area is different, but a lot of it goes back to them co-opting the protesters in the Vietnam movement and then replicating that in Southeast Asia. Brian Burlett talks about that. He doesn't go back into the history the way I do, but he talks about it more in terms of current events. He does go back into history a little bit, but when you start talking about the history of the Frankfurt School, they realized that communism itself didn't work, so they switched it to, communism is no longer the end game, to market socialism is their end game. And with the Frankfurt School, you can throw in the deconstructionalist of Derrida or the work of Foucault.
All right, George, I just want to pop up 2 memes here before we call this a recording. This is with regards to the lithium mining that is going on here. This is what those pro-lithium people look like. That's all I have to say about that. And let's not forget that in the 1980s, it was cool to boycott the Moscow Olympics. So, boycott the Olympics in one way or another. George, thank you again for sharing that. I don't know even how to term it. It's like a universe of information, basically. Overarching analysis.
Go on my website and memorize this as the homework.
There you go. Homework. Check out the links in the description. Thanks again, everybody who stuck around to the end. Thank you to Woo for the music. Keep forgetting to say that. And everybody, like, share, subscribe. George, we'll be back sooner or later. Thank you again.
All right. Later. Bye.